Conversations, interviews, communication, a lot of that is driven by questions. How can we ask better questions in our communications? So a really powerful communication skill has to do with asking good questions. And I think to get started on this, it's important to go back to focus for just a minute. Remember, where you put your focus is going to determine and guide and direct and steer how you're going to show up with people. In an interview, for example, or in any situation where a question would be a helpful communication tool. So referring back to this video that you can link to right up here, the influence quadrant. Do you remember the conversation we had about that? Here's a quick little visual reminder of the influence quadrant, where we can be focused in any of these four areas: on how we feel about ourselves, on how other people feel about us, on how we feel about other people, or the green influence quadrant, where we focus on how other people feel about themselves. And that's where we can have a powerful impact when we are asking questions. This can apply in a lot of different ways too. For example, a job interview, okay, where you get to ask questions. A podcast interview, where you're featuring someone on your show and you want to ask them questions. How about in a family, in a marriage, or between parents and kids? These are all places where effective questions can go a long way toward improving the relationship or the outcomes that you're looking for. So focusing on your focus. Does that sound like double talk? We need to be aware of, cognizant of where our focus is, and then choose an area of focus that's actually going to support what we're trying to accomplish. As you get to that green influence quadrant, people will be willing to open up to you. People will feel more safe in that interaction with you. And you're going to get better answers to your questions too. So the next thing we get to talk about in terms of questioning is being really clear about the difference between questions and statements disguised as questions. Notice that sometimes when a question shows up, it's not really a question. It's a statement disguised as a question. One example that comes up goes back to some of the things we've talked about regarding gratitude. What if you're trying to find something that you're grateful for about something that's challenging, and a question comes up in your mind? What could I possibly be grateful for about this? Hear the exclamation point? It's not really a question. Watch your punctuation. Turn it back into a question mark and then ask it again. What could I possibly be grateful for about this? See, when we turn it back into a question, it actually gives us the opportunity to steer our brain in a whole different direction. Some questions are actually accusations or declarations. They're not really questions. So be sensitive to that. Here's another example, especially in an interpersonal relationship, the question why, especially when it's followed by, did you do that? Okay, why? Why did you do that? Why would you do something like that? Is it a question? No. It's an accusation, disguised as a question. It's not even a very good disguise. How are people going to react to that kind of a question when it's actually an accusation? They're going to react with defensiveness. So be aware of what is a question and what is actually a statement or an accusation disguised as a question. Here's a quick example of how this could play out in a relationship, for example. I had a couple here in my office. He is a cab driver, public transportation, okay, well, private transportation. She found out that he had taken the phone number of a young woman who had hired him in his cab one day. Took her phone number, okay? She's coming unglued about that as she comes at him with a question. Or is it? You see how it feels to you. Why would you do that? Why would you take that young woman's number in your cab? Okay, now how do you think he's responding about this time? Defensively. Oh yeah, because he is being accused, isn't he? So he comes back with, well, I was just, and it wasn't what you and it was. Okay, so he's coming up with all of this defensiveness. Why is he being defensive? Because he's not being questioned, he's being accused. See the difference? I called the timeout right there. I said, hold it, everybody. Just stop for a minute. What if I gave you two options? What if I had two buckets here in the office and you have to put it in one bucket or the other? Either it's a good idea or not so good an idea. Okay? And then I asked him, taking a young woman's phone number on your cab. Good idea or not so good idea? Which bucket would you put it in? He's like, oh, bad idea. She's surprised. She's like, really? Yeah. Her question wasn't a question. It put him in a defensive position, and he's trying to defend something he doesn't even think was a good idea to start with. Isn't that interesting? But we put each other in these positions all the time based on how we ask our questions. So make sure you know if it's a question or a statement or an accusation disguised as a question. Okay, now another little tip that's going to help with the questioning. And this is a powerful, very basic principle in understanding the difference between an open question or a closed question. Open-ended questions are those that actually open up the conversation. A closed question leads to a dead end, usually a yes or no answer. So let's use an example here with maybe a parenting example, okay? Let's say that your teenager comes home from school, okay, comes in through the door, thumps the books down, grabs a snack out of the fridge, and you come up to your teenager and you say, so did you have a good day at school? Now, not a bad question, closed question, because it can be answered with a yes or a no, or some variety of those. But it leads to a dead end. It doesn't open them up. So, yeah, it was fine. Okay, and that's it. Sometimes that's all you get out of a teenager anyway. What if we were to open it up? Now, open-ended questions, I've got a couple of examples here that I wanted to share with you. Here we go. How do you like this? Tell me about whatever, okay? So instead of saying, hey, did you have a good day at school today? You say to your son or daughter, hey, tell me about school today. Do you see how that opens it up? There's a lot of places we can go with that. How about this one? Help me to understand, okay? And this can take the place of any why question. Why did you do that? Help me to understand what was happening yesterday with the car, okay? Instead of, why did you get a parking ticket? Or help me to understand yesterday what was happening. Do you see that opens it up? Help me to understand. Here's another one, similar to the previous one. Walk me through this. Okay, if you're not understanding something or if you want to get more information, walk me through that. So tell me more about, help me to understand, walk me through. Now notice something. These aren't questions either. These are invitations. And it opens it up for people to actually take a turn and respond and add some content, especially in the context of like a podcast interview. I do a lot of podcasting, and as I interview people for my podcast, I get so much more mileage out of those kinds of invitations. They're not even really questions, invitations. Tell me about, walk me through, help me to understand. That tends to open people up and give them the permission to actually share some valuable information, rather than closing it down and saying yes or no, something simple like that. Here's another example. You can use this in business, in family, wherever it fits. Do you understand? Okay, open or closed? Oh yeah, that closes it down. They can say yes, they can say no, they can say I don't know, but it closes it down. What do you understand about what we just discussed? What is your understanding of whatever the topic is? See, those are questions that are going to open it up a little bit more. Have a whole lot more fun with that.
So what is there to like about Live on Purpose TV? It's really a question, not a statement disguised as a question. I'm glad you're subscribed. Please share with someone that you think would benefit.